So in today's video, I will be discussing 3 basic flash photography techniques that's guaranteed to level up your photos and at the same time show you how I use those techniques to create this image. So hi everyone, this is Jiggy, a portrait and wedding photographer from the Philippines, and welcome to the channel. So before anything else, if you guys haven't subscribed to the channel and would want to learn more about off-camera flash photography or maybe just photography in general, then this channel is for you. So you might want to consider subscribing, and while you're at it, click that notification bell so that you get notified every time I upload a new video. And if you want to see some of my images, you could always find me on Instagram. It's at Jiggy Alejandrino. So today's video, I will be sharing 3 very basic techniques that I use often to create my flash photography work or to create my images using flash photography. And I will be doing this with the help of some behind the scenes photos during one of my engagement shoots. However, I have this premise before I go any further that this is not a basic flash photography tutorial, but rather basic techniques for those people who are already aware of how to use their flash. In other words, I will be discussing shutter speed, ISO, and aperture, and in relation to flash power. So I won't be explaining that anymore. It is under the assumption that the person watching or you guys watching this video already understand the basics of flash photography. Alright, so here goes. So this image that you are seeing now was shot by my assistant photographer using just ambient light. So I used this photo as a baseline to show you how everything looked like without flash, and the settings were f2.8, 1/1000, ISO 100. This was shot with an A7R Mark II. Now, I also used an A7R Mark II with a 16-35 f4 lens, and the light that I used was my Photix Indra 500 with a standard reflector. The Photix Indra 500 is a 500 watt studio strobe that has an option for battery power. That's why it allows me to bring it in situations or in locations such as this. The nice thing about this Photix Indra is that it could do TTL, high-speed sync, and of course it's got 500 watts. Now, this is how it looked from my composition using my 16-35. This is my Photix Indra, and this is a standard reflector. Now I underexposed the scene to bring out a bit of the blue sky here, and my settings were f22, 1 second, ISO 100, which now brings me to the very first technique that I want to share with you. Always try as much as possible to shoot within your flash sync speed. Now, don't mind this 1 second here because I will explain that later, but I technically shot at 1/250, which I will show you in the next image. 1/250 is my flash sync speed. For my camera, it differs dependent on the camera and the trigger that you are using. Sometimes it's 1/60, 1/200. Now, why do I suggest shooting within your flash sync speed even if your aperture has to stop down? Because you are going to be able to maximize the power of your flash. Of course, my Photix Indra 500 had the ability to do high-speed sync. However, high-speed sync would really remove a lot of the power of your flash. In my estimate, it basically takes away 3/4 of the power of your flash depending on how fast your shutter speed is. So it's always best to just try to stay within your flash sync speed, and if you have to, just put an ND filter to cut the light, or maybe stop down, which is what I did in this particular image, which I will show you now. This was the image that was shot with flash. This again is my standard reflector, and I had a grid on it so that I could limit the spill of the light and basically focus the light on them, which is something that I love doing. But this image shows you that the light, even though it popped already or the flash already worked, it is still in the scene, which is now the second basic technique that I want to share with you. It doesn't matter if your flash is in your shot. The most important thing is the light is correct. In other words, the fall off of the light is correct. Even if your flash is there, it is easy to remove so long as you have the foresight to know that you will be removing that flash. There are 2 ways to do that. One is you take 2 images on a tripod so that your camera doesn't move. one with a flash and one without the flash with the same settings, and you can just stack them in post. Or if you don't have a tripod with you, you could always just put the flash in an area that's easy for you to remove in post-production via the clone stamp tool or content aware fill. The most important thing here is that you do not put the flash in an area that will destroy your image, let's say in front of your subject or very near to your subject. That will actually destroy your image. Okay, so this is the output straight out of the camera of how the scene looked like. You could see that the clouds were bluer already because I underexposed. This was my settings. F18 1/250 ISO 100. I was an F18 because I didn't feel the need to really use an ND filter. I don't mind shooting at F18 or F22, especially with a wide shot, because I don't mind if everything's in focus. Because I would rather actually have everything in focus than blur out the background. Now, the third technique that I would want to share with you guys is that even if we are shooting photos, we want to try to get movement to make that photo more dynamic. Now, you could see here in this image that since I shot this one at 1/250, the waves basically stopped. In other words, I froze motion, which removes how dynamic the scene actually was. If you're shooting portraits, it could be a matter of making the hair move or the hair fly or the gowns move. It really depends on how you want to add movement into your image, but it's always nice to add that little bit of movement. That's why I took another shot like this, and as you can see, my settings were, my shutter speed was already at 1 second. Having my shutter speed at 1 second allowed me to have the motion blur because the waves were really traveling fast. 1 second was more than enough. And this time, I had to put an ND filter in order for me to get my shutter speed at 1 second and still have the entire image properly exposed. Now, I did use a tripod for this series of images so that I can stack them in post. And of course, this was the final image. You can see how dynamic the waves are, how focused the light is. I was able to bring out a lot of my shadows here because of the fantastic dynamic range of my camera. And of course, the skies became blue. So just to recap, the 3 basic techniques that I wanted to share in this video was 1, stay within your flash sync speed if it were possible. Having to go beyond your flash sync speed would really take up a lot of the power of your flash. So by staying within your flash sync speed, and if you want to shoot wide open, I would suggest use an ND filter. But if the sun isn't as bright as maybe this one, the midday sun, then you could use high speed sync so long as your flash is powerful enough. Number 2, if your flash is not powerful enough or you have no choice but to put your flash in the frame, by all means put it in the frame. Just make sure that it is in an area that's easily removed via the clone stamp tool or maybe even content aware. Or if not, the best possible way to do it is really just take 2 shots, one with flash and one without with the same settings and having your camera on a tripod. And lastly, add a bit of motion in your images, whether it be from the waves, the clouds, your dress, the hair. It's always nice, or even just a pose, the movement. It's always nice to have a bit of movement in some of your photos. Okay, so if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. And I really do hope that you liked this video. And if you did like this video, subscribe to the channel. And while you're at it, click that notification bell so that you get notified every time I upload a new video. And if you want to see more of my images, you could always find me on Instagram. It's at Jiggy Alejandrino. Okay, till the next video.